Okay, well, thank you for being here with me. I'm here with League of Women Voters. I'm here as the voting assistance officer from Post Hong Kong. It's the U.S. Consulate General Hong Kong and Macau. And my role as voting assistance officer is to facilitate voting for U.S. citizens living overseas in Hong Kong or Macau. And what we do to facilitate voting is answer questions that we receive by email or fax about the process. We also accept ballots from private US citizens in Hong Kong and Macau. And finally, we work with organizations such as yourselves, League of Women Voters, that promote voting and make sure American citizens know how they can still participate in their elections while living overseas. And so with that, I'm happy to entertain any questions you have about voting in this important election year.
Holly, would you like to kick it off for us?
Great, thank you. I'm Holly Smith with the League of Women Voters in Hong Kong. First question is, when do I need to register to vote, and how can I find the deadlines for my state?
So we recommend that US citizens register and request their ballots by August 1st. That date has passed, so if you have not yet done so, I recommend you do so as soon as possible to make sure that you have everything you need to vote November 3rd. If you want to know your state's particular deadlines, you can find that information out on fvap.gov. That's fvap.gov. That website is comprehensive and includes a table with every state, all their primary election, state election guidelines. So that's something that you can access from the privacy of your own home and make sure that you know all the deadlines for your particular state.
Thank you. I'm Angela. I have another question for you. So as an overseas voter, we have to vote in the state of our last residence. So how do you define last residence, and how do we each determine that?
Well, where you consider your residence for voting purposes is technically where you were last domiciled immediately prior to leaving the US. So if you lived in the United States, where that was immediately prior to moving overseas, this is still valid even if you no longer own property in that state, no longer have any ties to that state, no longer intend to return to the US. You can still claim that as your residence. There's also voting options for those who've never lived in the US. And many people don't know this, but if you are someone who wants to vote and maybe your parents lived in the US, but you never have, you were born overseas, I encourage you to go to fvap.gov, fvap.gov, and look up a handy table that they have for those who were born overseas and never resided in the US. Depending on the state, you may still be able to vote.
Great, thank you. Now, what if I'm registering and I'm going through the process, but the state's not registering me and they're not responding to me? How can I seek help with registering to vote?
Well, that's one reason why the fvap.gov, fvap.gov website is so special, because if you're having trouble with your state's electoral website and they're not responding to you, no worries. You don't have to worry about that. Just register through fvap.gov. They have a handy federal postcard application, the FPCA. Sorry, there are a lot of acronyms here. I'll try to spell everything out. But the federal postcard application is something you can fill out online on the website and submit. And it's something that allows you to both register to vote and request your ballot in one easy step. You can do so no matter what state you consider your state of residence. What will happen is through using the FPCA, you register and request your ballot, which they should be delivering to you at least 45 days ahead of the election. Another benefit to registering that way with the FPCA is if you don't, for some reason, receive your ballot 30 days before the election, you have the option to fill out the federal write-in absentee ballot, the FWAB, and you can do so also via that website. That ballot is also located there if you don't receive your state's ballot 30 days before the election.
Thank you.
Great. How can I find out if my overseas voter registration for my state was reset due to the Federal Move Act, or do I like whether I need to re-register?
So what you can do is go to your state's electoral website. Many states have a website where you can look up your registration status to see whether they consider you registered to vote or not. However, because of the fact that the FPCA is available, we encourage everyone to fill that out every January, because if you are registered to vote, all it will do is request the ballots you're eligible for. If you're not registered to vote, it will register you and request the ballots you're eligible for. So it's really a win-win situation. We encourage everyone to fill out anew every January, every calendar year, to make sure that you are eligible to vote in that year's elections.
Great. That kind of answers the next question, which I'll sort of reiterate though, which is that, let's say I'm just generally, regardless of the MOVE Act, I'm not sure if my state kept me on the voting list. Should I just re-register just in case? It sounds like the answer is yes. Why not? It doesn't hurt. All right.
Yes, it doesn't hurt. You're right. As I say, if you re-register, register for the same state, the
Right.
same place, but it won't double register you. It'll just request the ballots you're eligible for if you're already registered there.
Great. When I do that registration, do I need to have an ID or send in a copy of any ID when I register to vote with the FPCA or through my state's online system?
No, you do not. You do not require an ID to present in order to register to vote.
Thank you.
So for someone who's not 18 yet, but will be 18 by November 3rd, can they register to vote?
Yes, they can. So when you fill out the FPCA, you'll see there's some affirmations that you check. One of them is saying, I will be 18 by election day. It doesn't ask you to say you are currently 18. You can register using the FPCA if you know you will be 18 by election day.
Makes sense. Okay, here's a kind of common but specific one. So it's been asked, if I vote in elections, will the state deem me a resident and charge me taxes? And I've also heard variations like, hey, what happens with that data? Am I going to be called for jury duty? Like, is it going to go on a list for a bunch of other stuff?
So for federal elections, there are no tax implications for registering voting in federal elections. However, it is important to be aware of two things. One, there may be tax implications for non-federal elections, so state and local elections. So if you are voting in state and local elections, I would encourage you to consult your attorney just to make sure you don't incur any extra tax implications that you weren't aware of. Secondly, if you are changing your residency, that may also have tax implications, voting residency state to state. So that's for that reason as well. I would encourage you to consult legal counsel to make sure you don't incur tax implications by changing your voting residency from one state to another.
And could you define for us what a federal election is? Which offices are considered federal?
So federal offices include the general election that we're about to have in November for president and vice president. When you vote, though, for local representatives, all the way down to, school board representatives, sheriffs, all of those are very important elections, but you should be aware that if you participate in them, you may incur state and local taxes. I personally vote in all my elections, including the local ones, and believe politics is local, but it is important to be aware.
So just to clarify, for federal elections, that generally covers president, senators, and the House of Representatives. And then if you
Correct.
vote for governors or any other state office, that's considered or could be considered local.
Correct. So if you vote in the federal elections coming up, you don't have to worry about tax implications unless, as I said, you are changing residency, which is a separate issue. And it's important to know that that could potentially have tax implications.
Thank you. Now, on FVAP, they do have a prepaid or postage paid envelope that voters can use to return their ballot. Obviously, that only works in the US, but if you are handing that into a consulate or embassy for it to be mailed, will that prepaid envelope be postmarked at any point in its journey to the United States?
The answer is yes. At Post Hong Kong, at the U.S. Consulate General Hong Kong and Macau, we are accepting ballots and FAT forms and materials for mailing back to the U.S. And we postmark it the same day we receive it. So the day you bring it to the consulate, it gets postmarked that day's date before it's dispatched to the U.S. So that is correct.
Thank you.
Okay, great. What should I do if I don't get my ballot, but I've registered to vote?
So if you haven't gotten your ballot and it's October 3rd, about a month before the election, you are eligible to fill out the federal write-in absentee ballot. And that's something you can find online at fvap.gov as well. Fill it out and you can bring it to the consulate. We will mail it on your behalf. We also have copies as well if for some reason you can't locate it online. So that's a service that is available for you if for some reason your state ballot doesn't arrive. But it is important to note that many states now will send ballots electronically instead of through the mail. So investigate those options to ensure that you get your state's ballot on time.
Relatedly, I guess, are there any other like last dates or circumstances where I should complete a FWAB or federal write-in ballot as a precaution? Like, I think with postal services being uncertain, I suppose, I guess I have a robust imagination. I was like, I'm just gonna like just print it out and have it like next to me just in case. But yeah, how should we be thinking about using the FWAB this time, besides thinking about the October 3rd date?
Well, the recommended vote by date is October 13th. So I would say if you haven't received your state's ballot by that date, fill out the FWAB and just go ahead and vote. Make sure your vote gets counted. Many states are sending their ballots electronically and making sure that overseas voters and even voters in the US that for whatever reason, because of COVID-19 or other reasons, can't receive their ballots through mail are still receiving them. However, the federal write-in absentee ballot is something you shouldn't hesitate to fill out if you haven't received your state's ballot by October 13. And you can request it if you haven't received it as early as October 3rd.
Got it. Oh, yeah.
Some states actually, as you mentioned, accommodate electronic voting. All states are meant to have an option to email your ballot to you, but not all accept it that way. There are states
Correct.
who still only accept it by mail. Are you expecting that any other states may change their policy coming up to allow people to return their ballots electronically for the upcoming general election?
More and more states are moving electronic, which is great. And there's actually a handy visual chart or map of the US on the fvap.gov website. It's fvap.gov/COVID-19, I believe, which has a nice map where you can see if your state is accepting submissions electronically by mail or by fax. For those who are accepting by mail only, of course, the U.S. Consulate is here to accept your ballot and mail it on your behalf here in Hong Kong. So that's something that we're pleased and happy we can still do on your behalf. For submitting ballots or a federal write-in absentee ballot material, all you have to do is make sure it's signed and sealed in a prepaid postage envelope, which is also available on the FAB website, and we will accept it postmarked the day that you deliver to the consulate.
Thank you.
I think you answered my question, which is what can I do? How can I return my ballot if airmail isn't resumed between Hong Kong and the USA? So I guess we can drop it off at the consulate. But is there anything else we need to know about getting into the consulate? Are there closures or anything we need to be aware of, or a final date that we need to give it to the consulate?
Great question. So in terms of dropping off ballots, we are accepting ballots at the American Citizen Services Unit in the consulate on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 2 to 4 p.m. This is something that used to be every day, but we're trying to reduce numbers of people coming through just based on the COVID-19 numbers. However, we may expand to every day again in the future. Right now, it's Tuesdays and Thursdays, 2 to 4 p.m. Make sure to bring your identification, your US passport when you come in. And then there's also some security precautions and procedures. You can't bring certain things inside. One thing that's good to do is refer to our website before entering. Our website has handy links about what is and is not allowed inside the consulate, and also nearby storage facilities if you have luggage or other things you need to store nearby. And our website is hk.usconsulate.gov. And you can go there and on the home site, see a link to all the security regulations and information for entry. Did I
Great.
answer all of your questions?
I think so. I think we're done with our list, but thank you very much for taking the time out to help us explain to American citizens overseas how to vote.
I'm happy to, and if anyone has questions going forward, please feel free to contact us. We have an email address, acshk@state.gov. There will and you can also, of course, come to the consulate with your voting materials. If for some reason you don't have a ballot or aren't able to print one out, we also have ballots on hand as well. So we're welcoming to all US citizens that want to vote this year. It's an important election year, and living overseas, don't let your vote go uncounted.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you all.